Natasha, thanks very much. And hello to everyone out there. It's quite surreal being invited up onto a virtual stage. David and I are here to talk about comms over content. And just before we jump into that topic, as a quick intro to who I am and to who David is, I'm Hattie. I'm the research director at Wiser, and Wiser is an employer branding agency that has a cross between consultancy, creative and recruitment services. We're based in Farringdon normally, but we're obviously all based all over at the moment, like you all are. And as a sort of a part of my role as research director, I head up the team that does a lot of the EVP strategy work and kind of like data-driven insight into how you can build really strong employer brands. And I will let David intro himself.
Brilliant, thanks Hattie. Well, firstly, I actually wanted to apologise for my lockdown haircut. I decided to shave my head 4 weeks ago, so it's only just growing back. Looks a little bit like a baby gosling. So apologies for that. I didn't expect to be on with over 100 people. And just on that as well, this is something that as a business and personally we don't usually do. So I guess that's why we partner with Wiser. So thanks to them, and hopefully this is interesting for everyone. Frasers Group, for those who don't know it, is one of the biggest retailers in the UK. Probably the retailer that you will know is Sports Direct. So Frasers Group is the parent company. There's multiple other fascias beneath that parent company: Jack Wills, USC, Flannels, House of Fraser, Evans Cycles, Game. The list is endless and ever growing. I'm chief of staff for the Frasers Group. I've been there 3 years now. I actually have a background in engineering. So nothing to do with sort of people strategy or brand alignment, which is the sort of things I work on now, which brings a fresh perspective to that role. So we'll touch on that a bit later on, but that is a brief overview of what I do.
Awesome, thanks David. And yeah, we also have our virtual stand. Again, never thought that's a phrase I'd ever say, but we've got the lovely Oscar and Anya who are in our special projects team manning that today. So if you have any other questions about Wiser or Frasers, head over there. They are running a competition to win a free internal comms video made by our very talented films team. So yeah, if you go and say hello to them and find out a bit more about that, I really recommend it. So today, David and I are kind of, it's a topic that both of us have discussed lots, obviously, you know, in our partnership, but also just more generally, is the fact that people need a huge amount of transparency. I think now more than ever, this period of COVID has really shown that people measure how companies are treating their people. It's not really enough to just have a kind of shiny employer brand out there in the world. Because people, if they arrive in your business and there isn't clarity or transparency about, what's going on, what decisions are being made, that's really what people now measure companies on. And I think a big thing that we have seen, or even just when we're advising our kind of student ambassador network, we're saying to them to really look at how businesses have treated their people during this period, but even going further back. I think if you look at some of the strongest employer brands out there, they're the ones that really value transparency with their people. If you look at how Google runs their internal comms, they have weekly all hands where it's not just about announcing decisions. There's a very much like an open dialogue between the company and the people. They have Q&A, product demos. It's all about trying to get people, involved in who you are as a business. So I guess this talk is really to explore why internal comms is such a great place to start with your employer branding, but also why and how you can prioritize it, put strategies and sort of, I guess, in resource and time into it, and what the kind of outcome of that is. And then around the middle, I'll do a bit of a Q&A with David as well, just to like almost do a focus on the kind of what's been going on at Frasers Group and what his priorities are. So as I said, the strongest employer sort of brands and the strongest employer branding really starts with internal comms. In my opinion, I think if you look at what a powerful group you have as your current employees and invest in giving them the tools and the kind of almost like information to spread like the great word about your company, that's way stronger than, doing kind of like marketing campaigns or kind of like big campus events. I think if you really invest in getting your people to spread the word, that's a really strong place to start. And I think also, if you're looking, just to go back to that transparency point of employer brands that or companies that I've really seen do it well, Airbnb is an example of a company that really is very comfortable being open and transparent and putting out their kind of mission values, but also difficult decisions out into the world. And it's almost about, they kind of prioritize their internal comm strategy, and then they look at what they feel comfortable externalizing. And I think that's a great starting point for businesses to think about. As we kind of like go into this, I think what I'm going to do, David, is I'm just going to like ping you some questions around your experience and everything, but also what we'll try and do is answer any questions that people have coming, up in the conversation. So feel free to drop questions. David, it would be great if you could just start by, I guess, telling us a bit about your role as Chief of Staff and maybe some of like the biggest projects or kind of initiatives you've overseen at Frasers Group.
Sure. Yeah, I'd probably bore everyone to death and have everyone here all day if I tried to touch on everything. But as you can imagine, Chief of Staff at a company like the Frasers Group is pretty varied day to day, especially given the sort of retailer that we are, with having had quite an aggressive acquisition strategy over the last few years. It's been quite a busy time. My role started 3 years ago, focusing largely on sort of the talent acquisition strategy of the business. At that point, we didn't have a London office. We were only based in Shirebrook. So it was around building that. It was around, we were starting to diversify at that point from being just a sports retailer to acquiring some more lifestyle brands and specialist brands. So it was around sort of bringing in talent around all those acquisitions. My role changed quite drastically when we purchased House of Fraser. So that was a bit of a beast of a business, to say the least. It was probably half the size of the Sports Direct Group when we acquired it. So that was a massive integration process, which I actually ran. So I moved a bit away from just talent acquisition strategy into more of integration and people alignment, and actually moved into the system side of things as well. So that was probably the biggest project that I ran. But really the day to day is so varied. I mean, at the moment, the three biggest projects probably being worked on from my point of view were actually three that we're working on with Wiser, our employer branding strategy, our early career scheme, and our corporate brand strategy. So, those are probably the three biggest at the moment, but my day to day is incredibly varied, working on projects from sort of inception through to completion. So I hope that gives a little bit.
And why is employer branding such a huge focus for you at the moment? And why have you chosen to almost start with internal comms as your, first action point on the list?
Yeah, I think we're slightly different as a company. I think in the last talk, it was spoken about companies saying they do stuff, whether that's having a great internal comms strategy, having an incredible brand, and not actually doing it. I think we're actually the opposite. We probably do a lot of those things, but we don't externalize those. We don't talk about them internally, and we just don't communicate what we're doing. So for me and for the business, it was actually about eradicating that external perception of Frasers Group. But it shouldn't be, in my opinion, it shouldn't be that hard, because we do a lot of the things already. So it's trying to get the story straight, really. And I think internal comms, I think you touched on it briefly, we've got sort of an army of nearly 30,000 people. Telling those stories to those people and making them speak to everyone else about those stories is the best way to sort of change that perception.
Awesome. And what types of internal comms have you found particularly effective in the last few weeks? So
again, I'm going to keep talking about you guys, unfortunately, but Wiser created a fantastic video for us, which I saw a completely different reaction to that than we have done to some of our internal comms previously, whether that's newsletters, emails, Slack messages. It was just the video. It seems to speak to that Gen Z, X, I'm not sure which one it is now, and I'm not sure I'm included in that bracket anymore, but whether it's the attention span or the way in which people digest information these days, the video just seems to be the best way. It also humanises some of our more senior leaders in the group who, just because of how busy we are and how big we are as a corporation, it's hard to get it's hard to get those people in front of everyone in the business. You can't penetrate every single tier when you're a company of our size. So, but video, it humanizes those people and it makes everything a little bit more accessible. So for me, I think moving forward, we're gonna really strive to make video our primary communication method.
Awesome. And then I guess one thing that I've always been I was really impressed when we first met you was that your willingness to externalize internal comms, sort of flipping from that place of not pushing anything out into the world, with then going down the route of this is what we're telling our people, and therefore we feel comfortable with the world knowing that. Why is that, and why would you encourage other companies to do the same?
I think it probably goes back to what we were talking about. We do all this fantastic stuff for our staff. I mean, touching back on the video that Wiser created for us, that was around us paying all of our staff across the entire business 100% of their salaries throughout the whole period of lockdown, whether they're on furlough or not on furlough. That included our casual workers, or as you guys in the press may know them, the 0 hours contracts, and that included paying them 100% of their salary that would have been earned otherwise. And that's an incredible message at a time like this, where probably not many other retailers can do that. And that was something that we really wanted. We do these things a lot of the time and don't talk about them. I think it really changes the perception from an external point of view. Just that internal comms is fantastic for the people who are receiving the message. It's something that no other retailer has been able to do, or few retailers have been able to do. And it changes that perception of Sports Direct or Fraser's Group as we now are. So I think that's probably just one example, but it speaks to itself, really.
Yeah, awesome. And then when you're kind of like thinking about, I think there's a lot of companies out there who are probably either designing their internal comm strategies or revamping them in the way that you have. What advice would you give to those companies in terms of like time, how to like look at it, what resource you put behind it? How have you treated your internal comm strategy?
I think you've got to look, you've got to invest money in it, you've got to invest time in it, because you've got to treat it almost like a marketing strategy. You would happily go and spend X amount on PPC, a massive marketing campaign, getting the best influencers in, get out of home advertising, and you then look at that in terms of impressions and who it reached, and did it have an impact on sales? But a lot of out of home marketing stuff like that is very hard to attribute to sales anyway. But you're happy, and businesses are happy in spending the money on that. So I think you've got to look at your internal comms and your employer brand as a marketing strategy as well. I touched on it briefly, but you've got, every company has an army of employees, which there's nothing stronger than the voice of your employees, because they're going to go and tell 5-10 people about the experience they have at work, and you get a similar sort of KPI again, it's very hard to track, but a similar sort of KPI to traditional marketing as you do to employer branding. Again, I'm no expert, and we're definitely at the beginning of our journey, but that's truly what I believe.
Yeah, no, I think it's like what you say there about treating it like a marketing campaign is so true. Like we'll go into it a little bit in terms of like steps that people can take, but if you think about how you have almost like users within your business who are the people that are going to be helping you push out messages, and then you have audiences, whether that's like a sort of a graduate level, or you've got kind of like team leads or recruitment teams, like thinking about who's going to interact with your internal comm strategy, and then who you want it to reach, and really getting their feedback on how they're reacting to it is a really good mark. There's been some questions like popping up in the Slack, in this kind of like side channel there on questions. I'm going to head on, I know Natasha's very much like keeping us on time. So thank you, David, for kind of giving us a little insight and glimpse into the real face. I guess the main thing is we're kind of looking at this from a perspective of talking a lot about like why comms is so important, but I know there's a lot of companies out there who are thinking, well, great, like what steps can I take then? And I think we have sort of boiled this down into like 4 like starter areas for businesses to think about. So the first one from our perspective is review your business goals and kind of like leadership decision-making processes. There won't be, and I think someone's actually asked us as a question of, like how much can you externalize, or how much can you talk about? There are going to be decisions being made at leadership level that can't be instantly shared. So almost like go through your, almost like information flow of how decisions are made, who you need to kind of activate them, and really engage with them, and then make sure that people understand like why decisions are being made. We have it wiser, but also in some of our clients, this mantra of almost saying like people need to know not just their own goals, but their manager's goals, because you're not going to be able to get your people contributing to where you're trying to go as a business if they don't have that clarity of what everyone around them is trying to achieve. So almost start with that, and then almost like a yes/no exercise of what you feel comfortable communicating to team leads, then to the next tier, and then also like what do you feel comfortable externalizing. The second piece is around like understanding what motivates your people. So if you're communicating with people, you need to understand, one, what are their drivers? How do they like to be communicated with? As David said there, like, you know, video is a hugely engaging piece, but you'll also have groups in your company that prefer like, you know, email kind of comms. Maybe it's like weekly all hands in the same way that Google and a lot of companies do. So figure out what your different groups of people within your business, like how they like to be communicated with. And to do that, it's about researching, surveying, and getting your people to contribute to then how you build out that internal comm strategy. And then the third point is really about like dedicating time and resource to setting and maintaining a schedule. So as David said there, like treating it like it's a marketing campaign. You know, marketing campaigns, as you said, you put budget behind things, you really think about what tools you're using, what scheduling you're doing. And it is possible to kind of build out a very like formulaic internal comm strategy that then if you have that in place, of course you can be spontaneous if there are like great stories going on internally that you can like buffer it with, but having a set schedule of how you're going to communicate to your people is really important. And then the fourth point, which we touched on a little bit, is around considering your users and audiences. So track user groups, like see how much they're engaging with the employer brand by, you know, pushing out more comms, get their feedback on what they like to hear, what they want to hear more of. And set goals for each of your audience groups. So what do you want, you know, your recruitment teams to have achieved off the back of having more access to internal comms? And one thing that we do with a couple of our clients is actually setting up employer brand champion programs. So you don't always want your internal comms to be coming from the HR team or the marketing team or even from a leadership level. It's sometimes a lot more powerful if it comes from a kind of a peer level. So setting up groups or a task force within your business of around anywhere between 30 to 100 people, depending on the size of your organization, who have access to more kind of like assets and information, and then they can be the people who actually push that out, whether that's internally within their teams or on their LinkedIn and social media. If they're speaking at panel events, they're really just, they feel empowered to then communicate like what you want them to as a business. So that's kind of a summary of why we believe that internal comms is the place you should start with your employer brand, and then your employer brand is kind of the thing that brings that sort of that great messaging to life.